My lords and members of the House of Commons, it is mindful of the legacy of service and devotion to this country set by my beloved mother, the late Queen, that I deliver this, the first King's speech in over 70.
King Charles walked out of his private study at Highgrove House just after dawn, holding a sealed royal decree written on thick vellum. The morning mist hung low over the manicured gardens as two armed protection officers took up positions outside the main oak doors. His sudden decision to restrict Queen Camilla to the Gloucestershire estate follows an emergency briefing with Prince William, who presented undeniable proof linking her domestic circle to the missing crown treasures. With a single signature, the king effectively placed his wife under palace confinement, signaling an unprecedented reckoning at the highest level of the British monarchy. The Highgrove Lockdown Order. King Charles stepped out onto the gravel path of the Highgrove estate gardens at 6 o'clock in the morning. He wore a dark green quilted barn jacket over a wool sweater and thick tweed trousers. His boots crunched against the wet limestone chips as he walked toward the main garden gate. Two armed protection officers in plain civilian coats stood on either side of the iron gateway. They pulled the heavy metal panels shut and locked the deadbolts with a sharp metallic snap. The facts are that the reigning sovereign possesses absolute prerogative power over the security protocols and physical access permissions governing all royal residences. When national security risks or major financial scandals involve individuals residing within a royal estate, the monarch can issue an executive lockdown order restricting movement and communications. This administrative measure prevents unauthorized exits, halts the removal of physical evidence, and neutralizes external information leaks without requiring formal judicial warrants. Tension filled the quiet morning air as the click of the locked gate echoed across the courtyard. A royal protection inspector stepped forward from the shadow of the stone wall and saluted the king. He handed Charles a small black leather pouch containing the primary communications log. He told the king that all external landlines, internet routers, and mobile signal boosters within the main residential wing had been physically disconnected 3 minutes prior. The facts were that the immediate disconnection of communication lines was designed to cut off unmonitored transmissions from the property. Intelligence reports indicated that encrypted messaging apps had been utilized from inside the manor to coordinate the transfer of confidential estate documents to external actors. Silencing the local network prevented anyone inside from alerting outside allies before investigators could secure the physical premises. The mystery was which specific room inside the main residential wing had continued transmitting encrypted data packets for 40 minutes after the central power grid was shut down. The mystery resolved when the inspector pointed to a small indicator light blinking on a handheld signal detector. The signal was traced directly to a hidden utility closet beneath the main staircase. Inside the closet, technicians discovered an illegal satellite hotspot wired into an auxiliary power battery, operated by a portable laptop tucked behind a stack of garden ledgers. The facts were that the auxiliary hotspot bypassed all standard household firewall protections, creating a secure tunnel for outgoing data files. The discovery confirmed that a dedicated communications setup had been established specifically to move sensitive inventory records out of the estate undetected. A new mystery opened as the inspector opened the laptop screen and checked the last active transmission log. Whose user profile was logged into the encryption software at the moment of interception, and where was the destination server located in London? Charles told the inspector to seal the laptop in an anti-static evidence bag and transport it directly to the forensic cyber unit in London. The lockdown at Highgrove was absolute, and the digital containment operation had successfully severed the lifeline connecting the estate to the broader conspiracy. The sovereign had drawn a permanent boundary, ensuring that no further information could leave the grounds without explicit royal authorization. The morning mist began to lift slowly over the Gloucestershire fields as the king turned back toward the main entrance of the manor house. Additional security personnel in unmarked vehicles arrived at the outer perimeter gate, taking up positions along the estate boundary walls to prevent unauthorized departures or arrivals. Every access road leading to the property was now under armed surveillance, transforming the country residence into a secure containment zone. The facts are that securing a royal estate during an ongoing criminal investigation requires total mobilization of internal and external protection forces. When financial irregularities involve high-ranking figures within the royal household, standard police protocols must be adapted to respect constitutional prerogatives while ensuring that evidence is preserved without tampering. The deployment of specialized security teams guarantees that no physical artifacts or financial ledgers can be removed from the site. Tension escalated inside the main entrance hall as the household staff gathered near the grand staircase. They whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances toward the heavy oak doors that led to the private residential quarters. The estate manager stepped forward to ask why the morning mail deliveries had been halted and why all staff mobile phones had been temporarily collected by security officers. The facts were that the temporary confiscation of staff communication devices was a necessary precaution to prevent internal leaks from reaching external media outlets or legal representatives. Investigators needed to review call logs and message histories to determine who among the domestic staff had assisted in coordinating the unauthorized transfer of estate inventory over the past several months. The mystery was why the estate manager's personal mobile phone contained 3 missed calls from an unlisted international number originating in Switzerland just 5 minutes before the lockdown order took effect. The mystery resolved when the lead security officer took the manager's phone and ran a quick trace on the incoming call frequency. The Swiss number matched a private banking entity known to manage offshore accounts linked to shell corporations used in the missing treasure scandal. The manager was not merely an administrative employee, he was an active conduit for moving illicit communications between the estate and foreign financial handlers. The facts were that the discovery of the Swiss connection provided the missing link between the missing regalia and the offshore accounts uncovered during Prince William's initial investigation. The financial web was tightening around everyone involved in the administrative cover-up. A new mystery opened as the security officer noticed a secondary encrypted messaging thread on the manager's phone containing a list of 7 historical artifacts scheduled for transport out of the country later that evening. Which specific artifacts were listed on the manifest, and which private airfield in Gloucestershire had been selected as the departure point for the clandestine cargo flight. Charles instructed the security team to escort all household employees to the West Wing Assembly Hall for individual questioning. The Highgrove lockdown was holding firm against every attempt to breach containment, and the internal betrayal was being systematically rooted out piece by piece. The sovereign stood at the center of the operation, ensuring that absolute accountability finally prevailed across every corner of the estate. William's evidence vault presentation. Prince William walked down the stone steps into the secure basement archive beneath Windsor Castle. He carried a heavy metal lockbox in his left hand. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once before casting a bright, cold glow over the rows of steel filing cabinets. 2 royal protection officers followed closely behind him, carrying 3 large cardboard archive crates filled with financial ledgers. William stopped in front of a reinforced oak door and swiped his security card against the electronic sensor. The facts are that structural investigations into missing Crown assets require rigorous chain of custody documentation and verified financial records. When high-level irregularities are discovered within household accounts, senior working royals possess the constitutional right to compile forensic evidence and present it directly to the sovereign. This investigative process ensures that all allegations of asset diversion or inventory loss are backed by unassailable paper trails before any formal administrative or legal actions are initiated. Tension filled the underground vault as William placed the metal lockbox on the central mahogany examination table. He unlatched the brass clasps and lifted the lid. He pulled out a thick stack of bank statements and spread them across the green felt surface. He looked up at King Charles, who stood waiting near the opposite end of the table. William told the king that the documents in front of them proved beyond a doubt that historical artifacts from the royal collection had been systematically funneled through private shell companies over the past 4 years. The facts were that the bank statements tracked over £4 million in unauthorized asset sales routed through intermediary accounts in Zurich and London. The sales involved rare silver heirlooms, 18th century porcelain sets, and ceremonial regalia pieces missing from the primary inventory logs of Clarence House. Investigators traced the ultimate beneficiary signatures baked to accounts controlled by members of Camilla's immediate domestic circle. The mystery was how the missing items were removed from the secure palace exhibition rooms without triggering the automated inventory tracking system or alerting the chief curator. The mystery resolved when William pointed to a signature block on a maintenance override form dated 2 years prior. The form recorded that the automated inventory scanners had been manually powered down for 3 consecutive days under the pretext of emergency electrical repairs. The maintenance order was authorized by a senior administrative director reporting directly to Camilla's private office. The facts were that the scheduled maintenance blackout created a deliberate window of opportunity for physical removal of the artifacts without electronic trace. The perpetrators used the fake repair window to pack and ship the historical items out of the palace before anyone noticed the gaps on the display shelves. A new mystery opened as William lifted a small leather-bound inventory book from the bottom of the lockbox. The book contained a handwritten list of 7 replacement replicas substituted into the display cases in place of the stolen original artifacts. Who crafted the counterfeit porcelain pieces? And which external workshop produced the forged hallmarks matching 18th century royal standards? Charles picked up the leather-bound book and turned the pages slowly under the cold fluorescent light. The evidence vault presentation had laid bare the entire mechanics of the theft. The missing treasure scandal was no longer a vague suspicion. It was a proven conspiracy involving internal palace insiders. The sovereign closed the book, took a deep breath, and prepared to take the next decisive step in the unfolding crisis. The heavy steel filing cabinets lining the vault walls cast long shadows across the concrete floor as the 2 protection officers stepped back toward the reinforced doorway. Prince William remained standing at the mahogany table, turning over a small brass key recovered from the bottom of the lockbox. He told the king that the physical evidence collected across London and Berkshire represented only the tip of a much larger administrative iceberg. Additional financial records recovered from independent auction houses in Edinburgh and Geneva indicated that the artifact diversion scheme had been operating across multiple royal properties for nearly a decade. The facts are that multi-jurisdictional asset recovery operations involving crown property require close coordination between national law enforcement agencies and royal legal counsel. When historical valuables are illicitly removed from state-managed displays and sold through private commercial channels, recovering those items involves navigating complex international restitution laws. The Crown Estate holds reversionary ownership over all royal collections, meaning any unauthorized sale or transfer is legally void from its inception. Tension filled the room once more as King Charles crossed his arms and asked whether any foreign museums or best private collectors had already purchased the missing pieces. William pulled a separate manila folder from the top crate and opened it to reveal a certified bill of sale from a private gallery in Zurich. He pointed to the transaction date, which fell just 3 weeks before the king's coronation. The document showed that a matched pair of 17th century silver sconces had been sold to an anonymous buyer for £800,000. The facts were that the private gallery in Zurich acted as a primary clearinghouse for high-end looted antiquities originating from European private estates. The gallery used intermediary brokers to obscure the true provenance of the items, shielding the final buyers from public scrutiny. The discovery of the Zurich bill of sale provided the concrete proof needed to initiate formal international asset freezing requests through Swiss federal courts. The mystery was how the Zurich gallery obtained the export permits required to ship 17th century royal silver out of the United Kingdom without encountering customs inspections at Heathrow Airport. The mystery resolved when William displayed a fraudulent customs clearance certificate bearing a forged export stamp from the Department for Culture, Media, and Sport. The certificate claimed that the silver sconces were being shipped abroad on temporary loan for an international decorative arts exhibition that never actually took place. The export papers were signed by a corrupt civil servant who had since taken early retirement and relocated to the south of France. The facts were that the exploitation of cultural export loopholes allowed high-value artifacts to leave the country under the guise of official state business. The corrupt civil servant received a substantial commission for every fraudulent certificate processed through the departmental registry, creating a lucrative partnership between public officials and private antique traffickers. A new mystery opened as William produced a small address book seized from the former civil servant's London residence during a recent Dawn raid. The address book contained 24 handwritten entries listing code names and encrypted bank account numbers. Which high-ranking political figure was listed under the primary code name, and what role did they play in shielding the illicit export operations from parliamentary oversight. Charles examined the address book, his expression hardening as he recognized the handwriting on the second page. The ongoing investigation had moved past simple administrative theft into the highest corridors of political and institutional power. The evidence vault was locked tight, but the revelations within were about to break out into the open, threatening to reshape the monarchy's relationship with the government forever. The discovery of the missing regalia. An armed police sergeant turned a brass key inside the reinforced door of a climate-controlled storage unit on the outskirts of Swindon. He pulled the heavy steel door open and stepped inside, sweeping a high-powered flashlight across the rows of industrial shelving units. Stacks of unmarked wooden crates stretched into the dim corners of the room. The air inside the warehouse smelled of damp cardboard, stale dust, and packing wool. He walked down the central aisle and stopped in front of crate number 12, lifting a crowbar from his belt. The facts are that large-scale recovery operations involving stolen crown property require coordinated warrants executed across commercial storage facilities and private warehouses. When historical artifacts and royal regalia are systematically removed from display rooms, they are often hidden in off-site commercial units leased under fictitious corporate names. Law enforcement agencies rely on financial tracking data and shipping manifests to locate these clandestine holding sites before the items can be fragmented and sold on the international black market. Tension filled the cold warehouse as the sergeant jammed the flat edge of the crowbar beneath the wooden lid of crate 12 and pressed down with all his weight. The nails groaned against the timber before popping free with a sharp crack that echoed off the concrete walls. He lifted the splintered lid and tossed it aside. Inside the crate, nestled safely within custom-molded foam inserts, sat a collection of 17th century silver altar plates bearing the official royal cipher of King Charles I. The facts were that the silver altar plates had been missing from the private chapel display at St. James's Palace for over 3 years. During that time, insurance claims filed by the Household Administration had written off the items as lost during routine renovation work. The discovery of the intact plates inside a commercial storage unit in Wiltshire proved that the loss was an intentional inside job designed to liquidate valuable crown assets for private financial gain. The mystery was how the heavy silver artifacts were transported out of the central London palace without triggering the perimeter motion sensors or security cameras monitored by the Metropolitan Police. The mystery resolved when an investigator examining the crate's interior discovered a shipping label pasted to the underside of the foam insert. The label bore the logo of a commercial catering company that routinely supplied banquet equipment for private royal dinners. Delivery trucks belonging to the catering firm held permanent security clearance passes, allowing them to enter and exit palace service gates without undergoing physical cargo inspections. The facts were that the thieves exploited the trusted vendor network to smuggle high-value regalia out of the building hidden beneath crates of dirty tableware and banquet linens. The catering company's logistics director orchestrated the transfers, using his routine delivery schedule as cover for moving illicit cargo between palace annexes and suburban storage units. A new mystery opened as the investigator pulled a small manila envelope taped to the back of the altar plate crate. The envelope contained an unsigned delivery receipt, listing a secondary drop-off location in rural Oxfordshire, which private residence or commercial warehouse was designated as the destination for the next shipment of missing regalia, and who signed the receiving slip. The sergeant sealed the wooden crate with packing tape and instructed his team to log every item recovered from the Swindon unit. The recovery operation was dismantling the physical infrastructure of the artifact diversion scheme piece by piece. Every recovered heirloom brought investigators closer to uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy operating within the shadow of the throne. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as additional forensics officers moved through the rows of shelving units, tagging wooden crates and photographing each recovered artifact. Outside the warehouse doors, the rain began to fall harder against the corrugated metal roof, drumming a steady rhythm that muffled the distant sound of passing traffic on the nearby motorway. The sergeant walked toward the far corner of the facility, where a second stack of smaller metal lockboxes rested beneath a blue vinyl tarp. He pulled the tarp back to reveal a collection of velvet-lined cases stamped with the royal coat of arms. The facts are that historical regalia items used during coronations and state banquets are cataloged under strict parliamentary oversight. When items disappear from these collections, investigators must cross-reference serial numbers against 19th century inventory logs maintained by the Lord Chamberlain's office. This rigorous verification process ensures that every recovered piece can be legally tied back to the Crown estate before formal seizure warrants are finalized in the High Court. Tension filled the small corner of the room as the sergeant unlatched the first velvet-lined case. Inside rested a magnificent 18th century ceremonial mace fashioned from solid silver gilt, its shaft engraved with the botanical emblems of the United Kingdom. The mace was missing from the Tower of London Treasury inventory list, having been quietly swapped out for a brass replica during a scheduled conservation audit 5 years prior. The facts were that the substitution of ceremonial regalia required inside knowledge of the secure display cases and access to specialized tools used by museum conservators. The perpetrators had spent months planning the switch, ensuring that the visual weight and balance of the brass replica matched the original gold-plated mace closely enough to fool casual inspectors during routine monthly checks. The mystery was how the thieves managed to bypass the electronic vibration sensors attached to the glass display cabinet without triggering an immediate alarm at the central security desk. The mystery resolved when forensic technicians found a small signal jamming device wired into the cabinet's internal power outlet. The jammer emitted a continuous localized frequency that blocked the sensor from transmitting its status signal to the control room, creating a 30-minute window of vulnerability during which the glass case could be opened safely. The facts were that the sophisticated jamming equipment used in the theft was restricted military-grade hardware typically reserved for specialized security operations. Its presence inside a public exhibition hall indicated that active-duty technical contractors had been co-opted into the conspiracy to facilitate the physical removal of the state regalia. A new mystery opened as the technician retrieved the signal jammer from the outlet and checked its serial number against the Defense Ministry's procurement database. Which private military contracting firm purchased the jamming unit, and which palace official authorized the contractor's access pass to the Treasury vaults. The sergeant carefully placed the ceremonial mace back inside its velvet case and locked the brass clasps. The Swindon storage unit was yielding layer after layer of illicitly acquired history, exposing a massive network of internal collusion that stretched from the palace kitchens straight into government supply chains. The investigation was moving forward with relentless precision, leaving no room for the conspirators to hide. Camilla's isolation and loss of staff. A heavy oak door clicked shut in the west wing of Highgrove House as a royal protection officer turned the deadbolt from the outside. Inside the quiet drawing room, Queen Camilla stood by the fireplace. She wore a dark green silk blouse and black trousers. Her hands rested on the mantelpiece above a cold hearth. 2 empty armchairs faced the unlit fire. The room was silent except for the faint hum of a refrigerator in the pantry down the hall. The facts are that domestic staff assigned to senior members of the royal family operate under direct employment contracts managed by the sovereign's household office. When an investigation uncovers systemic financial irregularities or asset diversion within a royal residence, the monarch holds the executive authority to reassign, suspend, or dismiss any staff member linked to the household. This administrative action isolates the individual under suspicion, severing their access to internal communications and external support networks. Tension filled the drawing room as the door clicked open again. The head of domestic staff, a man who had served the estate for 12 years, stepped inside. He carried a leather briefcase in his right hand. He stopped 3 paces away from the fireplace and placed the briefcase on the mahogany coffee table. He did not look up at the Queen. He told her that her personal secretary and 2 administrative assistants had just been escorted off the property by security guards. The facts were that the dismissed staff members were directly implicated in routing unauthorized communication traffic through the estate's auxiliary servers. Financial audit trails showed that these individuals had coordinated the transfer of inventory logs and shipping manifests to external commercial partners over a period of 18 months. Their removal left the residential wing completely devoid of personal assistance or administrative support. The mystery was why the personal secretary attempted to shred 3 leather-bound appointment diaries in the kitchen sink just seconds before the security team breached the administrative office. The mystery resolved when an investigator stepping into the doorway held up a partially intact diary page retrieved from the plumbing trap. The page contained a handwritten schedule of clandestine meetings held at a private London hotel with international art brokers. The appointments coincided with the exact dates when major historical artifacts disappeared from the royal collection storage rooms. The facts were that the appointment diaries served as the physical ledger, linking domestic staff members directly to the external antiquities trafficking ring. Destroying the pages was a frantic attempt to hide the identities of the foreign buyers who purchased the stolen regalia pieces. A new mystery opened as the investigator pointed to a circled entry on the retrieved diary page dated 2 weeks prior, which prominent political donor attended the private hotel meeting, and what role did they play in financing the illegal artifact shipments. Camilla turned away from the cold hearth and looked at the closed door without answering. Her personal isolation was now complete, and the protective barrier of household staff had dissolved under the weight of unassailable evidence. The sovereign's lockdown order had turned Highgrove House from a private sanctuary into a fully contained holding area, cutting off every escape route and every loyal ally. The afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, visible through the tall sash windows. Outside, a pair of armed patrol officers walked past the terrace, their boots crunching rhythmically against the gravel path. Inside the grand salon, the antique grandfather clock struck 4 in a deep, resonant tone that hung heavily in the air. Camilla walked slowly from the fireplace toward the window, watching the patrol officers complete their circuit around the perimeter wall. The facts are that containment protocols during high-level royal investigations require unbroken perimeter security to prevent any attempts at physical escape or clandestine rendezvous. When internal staff members are removed, remaining occupants are subjected to continuous surveillance by specialized protection units reporting directly to the sovereign. This level of supervision ensures absolute control over the physical environment, while legal teams finalize the remaining asset seizure warrants. Tension lingered in the hallways as the estate chef walked up from the kitchen to deliver a simple tray containing a pot of tea and a single porcelain cup. He placed the tray on a small side table near the window and turned to leave without speaking a word. Camilla asked him if any external deliveries had arrived at the back gate during the past hour. The chef paused at the threshold and replied that all delivery vehicles had been turned away by the armed guard units stationed at the main entrance. The facts were that the complete blockade of external supplies forced the household to rely entirely on emergency rations inventoried and distributed by the Royal Protection Command. This logistical squeeze eliminated any possibility of smuggling items out of the estate hidden inside routine food and supply shipments. Every incoming and outgoing movement was subject to physical inspection by trained security personnel. The mystery was how a small padded envelope addressed to Camilla's private secretary managed to slip past the security screening checkpoint at the main gate earlier that morning. The mystery resolved when the head of security entered the drawing room, carrying the intercepted padded envelope in a clear plastic evidence bag. He placed the bag on the coffee table beside the leather briefcase. He informed the Queen that the package contained a flash drive and a handwritten note bearing no return address. The note instructed the recipient to wipe all local server drives immediately to prevent forensic recovery. The facts were that the warning note originated from an encrypted terminal located inside a commercial office building in central London. The digital signature on the message matched the IP address associated with the former Treasury Secretary, who had falsified municipal property records years earlier. The outside conspiracy was still attempting to reach inside the locked estate, desperate to erase the digital footprints leading back to their network. A new mystery opened as the security officer pulled a small USB cable from his pocket and connected the intercepted flash drive to a secure portable reader. What specific encryption key was stored on the drive, and did it unlock the master database containing the names of every secret investor in the stolen royal treasures? Camilla stared at the blinking light of the portable reader on the coffee table. The walls of her private isolation were closing in as every external lifeline was intercepted and decoded by the investigative team. The Highgrove lockdown had successfully severed her connection to the outside world, leaving her trapped inside a quiet country estate while the monarchy dismantled the architecture of her covert operations piece by piece. The evening temperature dropped steadily as the autumn wind rattled the window panes along the West Wing corridor. Inside the drawing room, the digital reader beeped twice, signaling that the flash drive's contents had been successfully downloaded into the secure forensic database. Two protection officers stepped further into the room, waiting for the final operational command from the sovereign's office. The isolation was absolute, the staff was gone, and the evidence was secure. The constitutional crisis. Unfold's Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer walked briskly down the long carpeted hallway of number 10 Downing Street. He carried a red ministerial dispatch box in his right hand. He wore a dark charcoal suit and a midnight blue silk tie. Two senior policy advisors hurried along beside him, flipping through loose pages of typed briefing notes. They turned the corner toward the main cabinet room and stopped in front of the heavy mahogany double doors. An armed protection officer pulled the doors open, revealing a room lit by tall brass chandeliers and filled with senior cabinet ministers waiting in absolute silence. The facts are that constitutional crises involving direct sovereign intervention require immediate coordination between the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Office, and senior legal advisors to the Crown. When a reigning monarch takes unilateral executive action to confine a senior family member and launch criminal investigations into missing state treasures, the government must formally acknowledge the sovereign's prerogative powers. This legal framework ensures that executive authority remains stable while Parliament processes the sweeping administrative fallout from the royal palace. Tension filled the cabinet room as Sir Keir placed his red dispatch box on the center table and sat down in the leather chair beneath the portrait of Sir Robert Walpole. He looked around the table and told his ministers that an emergency royal decree had been transmitted from Windsor Castle 40 minutes prior. He added that the Attorney General had reviewed the decree and confirmed that its provisions bypass standard family grievance procedures under ancient Crown estate statutes. The facts were that the emergency decree invoked a 17th century constitutional clause allowing the sovereign to suspend any household member or associate threatening the financial or structural integrity of the monarchy. This rarely used legal instrument bypassed the usual parliamentary consultation periods, giving the king immediate executive power to freeze assets, seize private estates, and restrict personal movement without judicial delay. The mystery was why the cabinet secretary had not received advance notification of the emergency decree through the standard inter-office courier service used by Buckingham Palace. The mystery resolved when the Attorney General stood up and placed a confidential memorandum next to the Prime Minister's dispatch box. The memorandum revealed that the decree had been hand-delivered directly to Downing Street by a senior military aide using a secure courier channel reserved exclusively for wartime national defense communications. The facts were that bypassing the standard civilian administrative channels prevented partisan leaks from reaching the press before the Highgrove lockdown order could be fully enforced by royal protection units. The military-grade transmission route guaranteed absolute operational security during the critical opening hours of the royal crackdown. A new mystery opened as Sir Keir turned to the final page of the memorandum and pointed to a redacted paragraph near the bottom. Which senior cabinet minister held a pre-existing financial stake in the offshore shell company tied to the missing royal artifact sales, and did their signature appear on the secret parliamentary exemption list? The Prime Minister closed the dispatch box with a sharp snap that broke the tense silence in the room. He instructed the Attorney General to initiate a full parliamentary review of all historical asset exemptions granted to members of the royal household over the past 20 years. The constitutional crisis was unfolding in real time, and the government had no choice but to align its legislative weight behind the sovereign's pursuit of absolute public accountability. The tall sash windows of Downing Street rattled softly as a sudden gust of autumn winds swept across Whitehall. Inside the cabinet room, ministers began reviewing the emergency legislation drafted to support the Crown's asset recovery operations. Every official present understood that the traditional boundaries dividing royal housekeeping from national governance had been permanently redrawn. The government and the monarchy were locked in a unified march toward complete transparency. The facts are that Parliament retains ultimate fiscal oversight over all properties and revenues associated with the Crown estate under modern constitutional law. When private networks divert historical treasures from public display into commercial offshore markets, legislative bodies must step in to amend property statutes and close long-standing regulatory loopholes. This legislative partnership prevents future administrations from shielding corrupt insiders behind outdated royal privilege or diplomatic immunity clauses. Tension lingered in the room as the Chancellor of the Exchequer raised a critical question regarding the tax liabilities of the seized estates. He asked whether the revenue generated from liquidating the recovered assets would return directly to the public treasury or remain within the sovereign grant account. Sir Keir replied that all recovered funds would be deposited directly into a dedicated public restitution account, managed jointly by Parliament and the Crown Estate Commissioners. The facts were that previous financial scandals involving royal properties were often settled through private administrative agreements behind closed doors, keeping public ledgers in the dark. The new restitution protocol established a binding legal precedent requiring full public transparency for every pound recovered from illicit asset sales. The era of secret financial settlements within the royal household was officially over. The mystery was how a missing 17th century silver chalice listed on the original Crown inventory had managed to slip through 3 successive national audits without raising a single red flag among independent accountants. The mystery resolved when the Chancellor revealed that the accounting firm responsible for auditing the royal household had also provided private tax advisory services to the shell companies involved in the artifact diversion scheme. This severe conflict of interest allowed the firm to sign off on fraudulent inventory adjustments while simultaneously managing the offshore accounts receiving the sales proceeds. The facts were that the compromised accounting firm had collected millions of pounds in advisory fees for masking the missing inventory as routine write-offs due to accidental loss or structural degradation. The discovery of this financial collusion exposed a systemic failure across the entire private auditing sector, serving government and royal accounts. A new mystery opened as the Prime Minister slid a second manila envelope across the table toward the Director of National Intelligence. Which managing partner at the accounting firm authorized the fraudulent audit reports, and what digital trail connected their London office to the Swiss bank accounts used by Camilla's inner circle? Sir Keir stood up from the mahogany table, signaling the end of the emergency cabinet briefing. The ministers packed their papers into leather folios and filed out of the room in quiet contemplation. The constitutional machinery of the state was now fully engaged, backing the Crown's historic cleanup with the full force of parliamentary law. The hidden networks of privilege and corruption were crumbling under the relentless weight of unassailable facts. A new era of absolute accountability. Prince William walked across the polished marble floor of the throne room at Buckingham Palace. He wore a sharp midnight blue evening suit with polished black leather shoes. Princess Catherine walked 2 paces behind him, carrying a velvet folder containing the newly finalized royal governance charters. The afternoon sun poured through the tall, arched windows, casting bright geometric shapes across the red carpet. They stopped in front of the elevated dais where King Charles sat beneath the gold-embroidered canopy. The facts are that the modernization of the British monarchy requires permanent structural reforms, codified into formal royal warrants and estate management guidelines. When historical privileges are abused for private enrichment, the reigning sovereign must institute transparent oversight mechanisms to prevent future abuses of power. These institutional safeguards strip away informal exemptions, ensuring that every working member of the royal family adheres strictly to public accounting standards. Tension filled the Grand Hall as William stepped forward and placed the governance charters on the velvet-covered podium before the king. He told his father that all regional estate offices, artifact inventories, and grace and favor housing allocations had been successfully transferred to independent oversight boards. Charles picked up a gold fountain pen from the mahogany desk and opened the leather folder to the signature page. He looked directly at William and Catherine before pressing the pen nib firmly against the paper. The facts were that the new charters permanently abolished the secretive back channels that had allowed non-working relatives and unauthorized associates to exploit crown properties for decades. Every asset, from historic Gloucestershire manors to 17th century silver collections, was now catalogued under strict national heritage protection laws. The signing ceremony marked the formal conclusion of the emergency cleanup operations launched in the wake of the treasure scandal. The mystery was why the final signature line on the official governance charter featured a faint watermarked seal that did not match any standard heraldic stamp used by the royal household. The mystery resolved when Catherine pointed to a small embossed microprint embedded within the paper fibers. The microprint identified the paper's stock as a specialized archive grade reserved exclusively for constitutional transfer documents ratified by Parliament. The unusual seal was proof that the new charters carried full statutory weight, legally binding the monarchy to parliamentary oversight for generations to come. The facts were that integrating statutory oversight into royal governance ended centuries of absolute financial autonomy within the household. The Crown and Parliament had forged a permanent alliance based on mutual transparency and shared accountability. Future financial audits would be conducted by independent national inspectors rather than internal royal appointees. A new mystery opened as a palace footman stepped through the side doors carrying a silver tray with a sealed dispatch envelope from the High Court, which senior legal official signed the final injunction freezing the offshore assets linked to the missing royal treasures, and what date was set for the public auction of the recovered items. Charles closed the leather folder and handed the gold pen back to William. The era of private privilege operating behind closed palace doors had come to an end. The monarchy stood on solid ground, anchored by absolute accountability and unshakable public trust. King Charles's historic decision to confine Queen Camilla to Highgrove marks a stunning turning point for the British monarchy. By acting decisively on Prince William's explosive evidence regarding the missing treasure scandal, the sovereign has placed institutional integrity above personal comfort. As independent oversight boards reclaim stolen heirlooms and dismantle covert networks, the Crown is undergoing its most rigorous cleansing in generations. Will this unprecedented display of accountability restore public faith in the throne forever?